Today on Ancient Insight, we will be exploring the word Lord, spelled with all capital letters, specifically as it is found in SHaMaWaT, Exodus 34, 6-7. And the Lord passed by before him, and proclaimed the Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abundant in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the sins of the fathers upon the children, and upon the children's children, to the third and the fourth. The word Lord, which we see repeated 3 times in verse 6, is not a translated word like others that we have explored on this channel, nor is it a transliteration, a foreign word which is spelled with the alphabet of another language, as we will often encounter in the Scriptures. The word Lord, spelled with all capital letters in most English translations, is a substituted word, which stands in the place of the Hebrew word Yahuwah. It does feel a bit strange to refer to Yahuwah as a word. After all, it is the name most often used to refer to the Most High in the Scriptures. Is a name a word which can be defined? It's certainly possible to look up the definitions and origins of modern names, but rarely, if ever, does that definition tell us anything about the character of the person who bears the name. Most often, parents are not even aware of the meanings of names when they choose them for their children, and when they are, that meaning seems to rarely be the reason the name was chosen. Examining the Scriptures seems to reveal that the ancients were more aware of the meanings of the names that they chose. MaSHaH, Moses; Noach, Noah; Naimai, Naomi; Abraham, Abraham, for example. However, even when choosing a meaningful name, parents then and now had no way of knowing what character would eventually develop in the person they were naming. So while we can strive for honest and meaningful names in our fallen world, we are aiming at a moving target, the changing and developing character of humans. Let's consider, however, that the word, the name Yahuwah, was put to work by the Most High to describe his own exclusive and unchanging character to us. For this reason, we think it is worthwhile and necessary to examine what this word means, and contemplate what our Father is telling us by inviting us to know it. The word Yahuwah is spelled with the pictographs Yod, He, Wah, He. The Yod is a picture of an arm and hand, and is defined by the action throw, the object hand, and the abstract concept of thanks. When used as a prefix, as it is in Yahuwah, the Yod indicates a third person, present/future conjugation of the action, or what we would say in English as he does, or he will do. The He is a picture of a person with their hands lifted up in the air, as if standing before an overwhelming sight which has caused them to gasp. It is defined by the action breathe, the object breath, and the abstract exist or life. The Wah is a picture of a nail or tent peg, and is defined by the action add, and the object peg. The 2-letter root which stands at the core of this word is He, spelled He, He. Repetition, such as we see with the double He, is a grammatical tool used frequently in ancient Hebrew for emphasis and enhancement. So when we see the He character used twice to form a word, it carries the meaning of the single He to another level. In action, the single He means breathe, the double breathe, breathe. Picture for a moment that you're walking down a path in the wilderness, and you come across a fallen traveler. You kneel beside them and hear them breathe in and out once, and nothing else. This could easily be the end of this person's life, their last breath. Now by contrast, imagine that you hear that same person breathe in and out repeatedly. Now you are certain that the person is alive. Concretely, the single he means breath, the double breath. Very interestingly, there's another word for breath in ancient Hebrew, and that word is sham. This word also means name and character. To the ancients, one's breath was synonymous with their character. This makes sense when you consider that what comes out of a person is logically an indication of what is going on inside, below the surface. Even medicine, both ancient and modern, has and continues to utilize people's breath to determine the state of their health. Taking one sample of breath would represent only a momentary state, insufficient to establish a sound diagnosis. Perhaps the person ate too much garlic or cheese. But repeated breaths, analyzed at varying times, would give a stable indication of a long-term state of health. In the abstract, the single he means exist, the double exist. A creature, a plant, an individual, even an experience, can exist for a time and then stop. Single lives seem to come and go, but observing the separate lives of a person, a bird, and a tree, for example, and noticing the common characteristics that they share, animation, reproduction, metabolism, respiration, interaction, leads us to infer that there is something that exists outside these individual occurrences, something that persists even though they do not, something we call life or existence. The word he, used in its bare root form, only occurs once in the scriptures, and that is at Yahazakwa'al, Ezekiel 32. It is translated as woe, alas, oh, or ah, a sound of exclamation, astonishment, grief, or grievance. You may notice that this sound of ah, or ha, or hey is utilized internationally to this day to express the surprise of having one's attention suddenly captured and held by intense circumstances. The wa, which we see sitting within the double he in Yahuwah, serves as an infix and seems to intensify, generalize, or perhaps even stabilize it, as it seems to do in many roots where it is used. If we look at the wa as the tent peg that its pictograph represents, we'll see that its effect on a tent is analogous to its effect on root words. Without pegs, a tent may stand, but it stands vulnerable to the wind, weak, unstable, flimsy, temporary, and longing for support in order to function. The addition of pegs takes the stability of the ground beneath the tent and adds it, joins it, hooks it to the fabric and poles, making the tent itself stable, functional, and enduring. It's almost as if the double he gives us the finite idea of breaths, but the he wa he gives us the broad idea of breathing. The double he gives the singular idea of life, her life, his life, their life, but the he wa he gives the general idea of being, the broad concept of existence. To date, we have found little corroborating academic evidence for this observation. Not that it's refuted, just that it doesn't seem to be investigated, as modern Hebrew studies focus heavily on triliteral or three-letter root words. However, this theory does seem to make sense both in concept and in practice, as we see how this wa infix interacts with biliteral or two-letter roots. It may be worthwhile to note here that the letter yod also functions as an infix, and when it is added within the he root, it has the comparable, if not identical, meaning of existence, life, or being. Now let's get back to the whole word, Yahweh, to see how these component pictographs interact to communicate meaning. The Yod prefix, as we mentioned, gives us the idea he does and he will do. The double He root gives us the idea of life and existence. In combination, the prefix, root, and infix of Yahweh gives us the concrete phrases, he breathes, he will breathe, he exists, he will exist, and the slightly more abstract, he is existence, he is life. The Father directly introduces us to this concept earlier in the 3rd chapter of SHaMaWaT, Exodus 3:14, when MaSHaH, Moses, asks the Father what his name is, and he responds, Ahaya, Ashar, Ahaya. It seems confusing at first. Why does the Father have 2 different names? And why do we not ever hear this one again in the Scriptures, but the other, Yahweh, we hear thousands of times? If you listen closely, you can hear a clue that will help clear this up. Ah-hi, ah. Do you hear the hey in there twice? Ah, ah. Just like in Yahweh. We are hearing the exact same root word, hey, this time with a Yod infix and an Al prefix. The Yod, as we mentioned before, functions just like the Wa in Hawa, and the meaning remains life, to be, exist, and existence. The Al prefix is the singular first-person conjugation, I do, and I will do. Altogether, the pictographs in Ahaya say, I breathe, I will breathe, I exist, I will exist, I am existence, I am life. Or simply, as the King James translators decided to word it, I am. The Ashar, in between, is a linguistic rope tying the 2 Ahayas together, often translated as that or because. So what at first sounds like 2 different names, Yahweh and Ahaya, are in fact just 2 different perspectives or points of view on the same name. The Father, speaking directly to MaSHaH, calls himself, I exist. Humans, MaSHaH specifically, speaking to other humans, call him, he exists. From our limited, concrete, and land-based perspective, life seems to be nothing more than a temporary state of relatively autonomous biological animation. We test for its presence with the beat of a pulse, or the fog on a mirror. But is that really the definition of life, or simply a description of our interaction with it? If the core character trait of the Most High, according to the Most High, is life, existence, then what state do we find ourselves in if we, with hearts still beating, deliberately disconnect from him? For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. Barashiat 2:17. Malachi 3:16. Then they that feared the Lord spake often one to another, and the Lord hearkened and heard, and a book of remembrance was written before him for them that feared the Lord, and that thought upon his name. We hope you find this helpful. May you bless and be blessed.